Diba pwede na, no?
Hindi na po tayo mag-start.
We're ready?
Yeah, I think so. Ate Beth, ikaw na lang mag-adjust sa iyo.
Sige lang.
Okay lang?
Doon ka.
Or dito ako. Ikaw. Ikaw. Okay. Okay na yan?
Okay.
Ay, good.
Ready? Okay, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be able to meet here again. I want to welcome some of you. Special welcome, Pastor Omar. I'm sure almost all of you know him because he's from AUD.
Yes.
Neighbors.
Your neighbors?
Probably you know him more than I do. Anyway, I'm so thankful that we was able to come. I requested him last Sabbath to want to come discuss it. So Pastor Manalo and Pastor Budaba will take the Monday and Tuesday lesson. And then Pastor Manalo will take the Wednesday and Thursday lesson. It's a little bit, I'd like to be honest. Hebrew is a little bit hard. The theology is a little bit hard to grasp, So we are always happy when Pastor Manalo is around because we really miss him when he's not around. Last Wednesday, we're by ourselves having prayer meeting. And there were some points where we did not understand and said, I wish Pastor Manalo would be here, So sometimes we're actually so thank you, Pastor Manalo, because sometimes we abuse you, I think, overuse you, but you enjoy you're benefited from your deep.
I don't feel overused. Why don't you welcome him to our congregation?
Yes.
Yeah.
He will be one with us.
Yeah.
Amen.
Anyway, yeah. He said he plans to join us, after he comes back from Africa. He's going to Africa next month, and then he's coming back.
South Africa.
Okay. Anyway, it's the final lesson that we have in the book of Hebrews. And it's the climax. It's the conclusion. See, after the 12 studies that we had in Hebrews, the 12 Sabbaths, when all were studied about Jesus, the center of Hebrews, we studied Jesus as the promised son, Jesus our faithful brother, Jesus giver of rest, Jesus the faithful priest, Jesus the anchor, Jesus the mediator, Jesus the perfect sacrifice, Jesus the way, Jesus the author and perfection of our faith. Everything that we have studied, Jesus, everything that he has done for us. Therefore, we can at the end we can say, after learning from Jesus, now we are able to love our brothers and sisters. That's why the man of words this morning says, let brotherly love continue. So after learning from Jesus, we should be able to do this because we love like how Jesus loved us. Because the love that we do as humans, sometimes it's selfish love, it's not brother love or selfless love, but mostly selfish love. But after studying from the character of Jesus, what he is to us and what he has done for us, we should be able to love our brothers and sisters. The lesson says brotherly love involves exhorting one another so that no one would fall short of the grace of God. What does it mean by exhorting? Remember, it says exhorting, not extorting. Sometimes we do extorting more than exhorting. What does exhorting mean? Encouraging one another. Right? We're able to say, you're right. When somebody is discouraged, we can say, brother, you're right. You can do it. We can do it together. My wife used to work with a professor at Lumalenda. And every time he asks something, you to do some, he's asked you you to do something. He doesn't say do this. You know how he says it? Let's do it. Let's do it. And it should be the attitude when trying to deal with our brothers and sisters. Sometimes our tendency is to be able to notice the things that are wrong. We go always say, oh, brothers should not do that. You should not do this. You should not say this. You should not do that. But sometimes you overlook the chance that we should be able to give some more encouraging word. When they're falling, we say, let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's walk together. Let's hold hands together. So, in the verses, how would be able to exhort or encourage each other? Hebrews 3:13 says, exhort one another daily. It says daily. So every day of our life, our prayer should be that we should come across somebody's way that we are able to encourage, give encouragement word, or maybe even help. So a daily it says here, let's make it a point to be able to encourage somebody daily. And then Hebrews 10:24 says, consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. To encourage each other to love and to do good works. Not, okay, then the next verse is, as brothers and sisters in Christ, we should be able to encourage and exhort each other by not forgetting to assembling ourselves together, especially as we are nearing the end. Because as we assemble together every Sabbath for worship, when we come together, we encourage each other. During the evangelistic effort, seriously, there was a point when Pastor Vito said, sometimes when we announce that we will be studying the book of Revelation, sometimes the first thing that comes to us is, oh, I've read it already. I know a lot already, so what should I cut? The seminars for those who have not read the book of Revelation or the new ones, But he said, there is a ministry of presence. That because of your presence, somebody's encouraged to go sometimes. Because in efforts like this, not all of us have the courage to invite somebody. But there are very few who are able to have that talent. I have a sister-in-law who doesn't even talk in church, But when the evangelistic series came, she had 5 people in mind that they would be invited. So the first one, I think she was able to bring in three new ones. And if these people who are able to bring visitors can bring their visitors, and then they come, and they see that a very few people are there, this must not be important. Because if it's important, the member should be here. So maybe when they see that very few people come, the next night maybe they will not come anymore. But if they see us coming, bring our children there, the meeting, and I said, oh, this must be something important. So they're encouraged to come. So because of our presence, we're able to encourage other people. That's why it says here, do not forget assembling. Sometimes we say, maybe I'll just stay home, Maybe the sermon, what the bachelor is good at TV, so we'll just stay home, stay in bed, and then to the point. But we should remember that our coming to church may be an encouragement to other people. Because as we come together, it's like fire. When you take away the fire, what happens? When separate the food, it dies, the fire dies. But when you put them together, it becomes a big fire. So that's what's happening.
Brother Ernie,
Yes.
let me piggyback on what you just said. Ministry of presence. For me, personally, just to see people in church is a lot of encouragement. I was telling my very good friend here before, it's our partner, because when we are partnered on the telescope, we seldom use. I told him that it's so difficult to receive that, so difficult. Yeah, and I came to know in the area because I knew there's a lot of people here. I know, and the Lord is good. So just not be dumb. I don't even have to participate. I just have to be here, and I know it helps. That's what
I know you love to be here because you have a lot of colleagues here. So
I know you already from a long time ago.
okay.
Thank
And
you.
then I just have word for the Sunday lesson. It's talking about how to take care about God's people. Does it mean our brothers and sisters? And in all the verses that's mentioned here, it talks about hospitality. Hospitality is very important. Sometimes my wife, they have the hospitality here. You think my work is important? All I do is cook and then feed people. Is that?
It's very important. It's indispensable.
Maybe it's a very. And I think for us Filipinos, we are very hospitable. We fry the last egg, from the chicken coop just to entertain the visitors. That's what happened with our, home, because of our home was in a barrio. And every time people from the conference come, my mother would come to me and say, to us and the children said, you stay out first because you have to feed the. And sometimes you are hungry and he said, go and play first before. But how could you play? You are hungry, but you do it anyway because they want
Iba yan yung
hospitality.
binaliktad na po. My story.
So, but I think that's a good trait of us, and let's continue to. And let's befriend everybody. But you know what? As brothers and sisters, there should be a very special bond among us.
Yes.
As seven. I think that's biblical. We love everyone, but there should be a very, very special bond that binds us together. If we are good to other people, we should always be good to all our. Because when we love each other in the church, we are able to attract other people. But if we in the church are divided, do not know how to love each other, then we are not attracting people. So I think the emphasis on the Sunday lesson is to be hospitable, even to strangers. And then it says here also that we should honor our marriage. You know, should be the best husband, should be the best father in the home, best man. But sometimes we take the ones who love, we take them for granted sometimes because they are there every day. And many times we take for granted. But you should give special attention to them. No covetousness. And then it says also, recognize those who rule over you. We should be the best citizen, law-abiding citizen. So I think these are the lessons that we can get from Sunday lesson. And now let's go to Monday. The lesson, and let's keep the time.
Monday, there's a lot to be said. Avoid sexual immorality and covetousness. For Monday and for Tuesday, it's leadership, relationship. And I'm just going to go into the questions for discussion, both Monday and Tuesday, and I'll try to come up with what I think are the solutions. Solution. Like Monday, what are the ways that contemporary society undermines sexual purity and at the same time feeds human love of money? In what practical ways can we strengthen its two dangerous vices? Seems like our lesson is telling us that at the time of the writing of the Hebrews, the problem in the society which was affecting the church was these two, sexual immorality. The pagans were so loose, especially the male people in a society where women were not considered to be equal. As long as it's discreet, our lesson tells us, as long as nobody knows, the man, the husband can play around. And then another one is covetousness. How do we solve this issue if we feel that we live in a society where these influences are so strong that it can be coming into the church? I'm talking to a friend of mine who was my student, and she said, some of you will know her. I'm not going to mention the name. She said, my two children are so worldly. Bring them back in and let them stay there. I want them to regain the missionary spirit that we used to have. And they're going to stay in the Philippines for a year, leave their jobs here just because of that. So how do we solve that as older people in the church? I feel that the solution, there's a lot of things we can say, but I feel that basically the fundamental solution is brotherly love. When we exercise brotherly love, then it will help us resolve these issues. I made a little study. I'm interested in studying the original languages. As I know you know, Philadelphia, brotherly love, coming from two Greek words, philia, love, and adelphos, brother, so brotherly love, Philadelphia. It's a noun, and it's a nominative singular feminine noun. There's something about the difference between how a woman and a man loves. And it seems like in the Greek, it seems like the love that the woman expresses is much, much deeper than what men can do. The dedication of women to their spouses, to their marriages, which is even true today. When those of us who may have been married, who between the husband and the wife buys more books on happiness in the home, buys more books on how to love your children? Who? Is it the husband or the wife? Generally speaking, in my observation, it's the wife. There's something about Philadelphia, which is in the feminine singular noun, that talks about that. And of course, mineto, abide in love, is to stay in a given place, a given state or relationship or expectancy, to abide, to continue, to dwell, to endure, to be present, to remain, to stand, to tarry for and for your own. And so one of the commentaries I read on Philadelphia is, it is a love of equals who are united in a common purpose, good and or good end. Love of mutual respect, shared devotion, joint interests, and common values. The love near and dear friends have for one another. I believe that if we exercise this kind of a love, it will help us strengthen ourselves and our children from the two dangerous vices of immorality and covetousness. When we go to Tuesday, what can we do to strengthen or improve the leader-member relationship in your congregation as well as with leaders around the world? Again, I would like to say that the fundamental way of resolving this would be, again, Philadelphia. That's why chapter 13 starts, verse 1, with continue, abide in brotherly love. In my experience as a student of the Bible for a long, long time, and in my reading of Ellen White's writings, I came up with one conclusion. This is my conclusion for myself. For me, this is how I define it. I don't know if somebody would be able to relate to that. I always say that to love, to exercise love, whether it's agape love or filial love, is to act in a godly manner. Now let me define what that means in my study. How does God deal with us? Does he deal with us directly or always through a mediator? Now, in some instances in the Old Testament, we know that God dealt with some people directly, like Moses or Abraham. But generally speaking, especially for New Testament Christians, God never deals with us directly. Because we know that if he does, it's either we don't understand, we may not understand, or we can be consumed by his glory. And so he sent his son to be the mediator between God and man and human beings. And to act in a godly manner, for me, means if Jesus is the mediator between me and God, Jesus should also be the mediator between me and my fellow. In other words, if I deal directly with my fellow man, it's so easy to be prejudiced. Just the way a person moves or talks or conducts things or relates with other people can in our mind, as human beings say, I don't like the way he behaves. So that's not the way a person should behave. But if I make Jesus the mediator between my fellow man and me, when I look at my fellow people, whoever they are, however they look, no matter how strange looking they are to me, based upon my cultural background, or in the way they speak. But there are young people who, when they talk, these things like that, they sing, if I deal with them directly, I'd be so prejudiced. But if I deal with them like God deals with me through a mediator, I will see people, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever do they stand for whom Jesus is. And when I look at people as people for whom Jesus died, then I will have a different outlook to him, because I make Jesus the mediator. John 3:16, and I will end with this. When Jesus said, God so loved the world, which is the cosmos. The world is the cosmos. Not only this earth, but the whole universe. And if God loves the whole universe, that anybody who believes that he sent his son Jesus, whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life, then that should be my attitude toward others. And so the problem of immorality, the problem of covetousness, the problem of dealing with leaders, for me, I can easily resolve it. because Jesus is my mediator between them and me. And when I act, when I show my love to them, I am acting in love blindly. Sorry for the short sermon, but
Thank you. Thank you.
so I'm done with I have an 11 o'clock preaching appointment by Zoom, so for a Canadian church. So I'll be leaving quarter to them.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dan.
Segments. The segments assigned to me, Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday, beware of diverse and strange teachings. Then Thursday, go to Jesus upside the camp. During the time of Paul, there were some Christians who still were not able to give up their connections to the temple services. In spite of the fact that they accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Savior and Lord, they were still being influenced, especially by those Jews who were dispersed, the so-called diaspora Jews. And this special group of people still actually believed, that they would receive spiritual blessings, benefits, as they participated in the meals, the special meals. Like, for example, the Thanksgiving meals and similar meals, and certain deeds or actions. And Paul warned them that they no longer receive any spiritual blessings from participating in those meals, because what Jesus Christ has done on the cross was sufficient. It was adequate. In fact, it was not only sufficient and adequate, but it was the only source. It was the only source of grace. And if they would access the benefits that would accrue from that sacrifice, then they would be strengthened. So as Felix points out in this segment, that Paul was not here talking about the distinction between the clean and unclean foods, because that was already settled in, especially in the book of Acts. So it was not a warning from abstaining certain types of foods, but it was a warning from participating, in certain types of meals. Now, how can we now bring this to our day? Today, there are no longer feasts. There are no longer special meals that we are tempted to participate in partaking. I believe that we can make an application of the same warning, that we should not think that there is anything that we can do to add to what Jesus Christ has already done. There is nothing that we can do to merit additional favors from God to make us more endeared to Him, because Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross is all that is needed, and it is sufficient, it is complete, it is adequate. That's why in Hebrews chapter 4 and then in chapter 10, Paul exhorts his audience to approach the throne of grace boldly, with complete confidence, because it is there where we find mercy and where we find grace in time of need. And me personally, I believe that all time is a time of need. There is no time that I do not need the mercy of God. There is no time that I do not need mercy of the grace of God. You know, it's very tempting. Like, if I may just make a connection with Galatians. I think we are familiar with Galatian heresy. The Galatian Christians said, well, it is good to accept Jesus Christ as personal Savior and Lord, but that is not enough. You should also keep the law. And of course, Ellen White made the point that when they were, especially Paul, when Paul spoke of the law, he was not just talking about ceremonial law, but even the moral law. So even the keeping of the moral law should not be deemed or considered as something that we complement to the all sufficiency of the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is all Christ or nothing. It is not Christ plus. Galatian heresy is Christ plus. So today, we can, you know, sometimes I reflect. You can observe yourself. Suppose you made a mistake and you feel so bad about yourself, and then you try to reform your behavior before you pray. If you still have that attitude, you and I are still guilty of the Galatian heresy and what Paul is talking about here in Hebrews. You remember what John says? If we sin, we have an advocate. And it has been my personal observation that when a Christian or a believer commits sin, it is there where Christ is the busiest to restore that person who has fallen into temptation. He goes into action right away. Well, if that is the attitude of Jesus Christ, then why should I wait to feel better? Oh, I should do something to show that I deserve the mercy, the grace of God. But that is not the case. Now to Thursday, go to Jesus outside the camp. There are several passages here that are cited by the author that inform us as to what or who and what kinds of persons and conditions were those who were taken outside of the camp. We have lepers, we have the adulterers, we have the blasphemers. In other words, all those people who are considered the lowest,
Outcast.
or the outcast of society. And of course, Paul is also calling our attention, or the attention of his audience, that Jesus himself did not die inside Jerusalem. He was brought outside of Jerusalem, near the gate, but outside. And then Paul says that let us go to him outside the camp, to share with his shame. And when Jesus Christ was here, he also said that if you follow him, you'll be willing to take up your cross daily. And follow him. Of course, the symbol of the cross now is not what it symbolized in the time of Christ and in the time of Paul. To the Romans, it was the most ignoble symbol. So that to be crucified was undeserving of any Roman citizen. So Paul was telling his audience, let us not be ashamed to be persecuted. Let us not be ashamed to be marked as different. Let us take it as a badge of honor, because that was also the experience of Jesus and also the experiences of the heroes of faith that are mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. But you know, in our case today, how many of us really are experiencing being shamed for being a Seventh-day Adventist? Even here in our community, how many of us have been abused as Seventh-day Adventists? I have not been in my experience as a Seventh-day Adventist. I know in my younger years I have abused some Seventh-day Adventists, but I have never been abused because I am a Seventh-day Adventist. Because I was a Seventh-day Adventist. Because today it is a badge of honor to be a Christian, to be But isn't it true that there are times, even in our own thoughts, that we question why I do what I do? What's the logic of returning the tithe? To me, I find no logic there. Especially God says that He owns everything. But I do it simply because God said, you do it. There are certain things that I do which sometimes my mind not only fails to understand, but even if I force my mind to understand, I cannot reconcile myself to understanding it. And I think as a professor, Pastor Dan may also have those some of those moments. So we have a different setting, unlike the setting of the original audience of Paul, who were actually suffering persecution. They were being imprisoned, and those who were outside of prison, they identified themselves with those who were in prison. They visited them, and some of them would even stay overnight And if they are not, according to Felix in his companion book, if they were not allowed to stay inside, they would keep vigil overnight. And then again, they would resume their ministry to those who are in prison when the day comes. How many of us really are experiencing those kinds of exposures? Especially now that I remember when Pastor Bermudez was still in the prison ministry. You remember that, Pastor Manuel? We used to have a prison ministry department in our church, but we did not see the necessity of activating it because, according to Pastor Bermudez himself, no one was allowed to go into the prison itself. So what? So some of us, those, I think Pastor Guadis was very active
in Toronto. And
Al-Qaeda. Prior to that. But when that time came, and it happened that it was during my time that this very, very strict rules kicked in. So this idea of sharing in the shame of Jesus Christ is almost very impossible to think how we could experience it in our setting. Because I do not see it. Maybe those who have been missionaries abroad.
they still have it, but you know, we used to have when we were in Paisa, every Sabbath afternoon they would go to Bilibid prison.
I baptized Pastor Santiago and I baptized 63 candidates. You know, we were so tired after.
They're still active then.
But there was still
But here I do not see, I don't even read much write-ups on any prison ministry.
it should be
So many
Restrictions, because I think there was one incident where female visitors were abused, molested by the prisoners, and that has triggered this very, very stringent rule. But I think the way I personally would apply this is: are you afraid? Are you ashamed to be known as a Seventh-day Adventist? Even without being persecuted, even without being abused? Do you openly admit that you are a Seventh-day Adventist? And are you open in articulating or in sharing what makes a person a Seventh-day Adventist, what you stand for? So there are certain circumstances that some of the actual physical and even emotional experiences of the Christians during the time of Paul may no longer be true with us who are living, especially here in Loma Linda, unless, of course, we romanticize our own experiences and imagine some non-existing persecutions. So I think that's how I cover segments.
Are those ones in the independent ministries who are very vocal, attacking the Pope, you know, very blatant. I mean, is that a good way thing, or because I remember the presentation of Elder Edward here. about the 666 number, he didn't even mention it. He approached it a different way. In the following week, during the pastoral meeting, a black plague came, and because he always listens to this independent ministries, very black, and he came in, he really criticized. And in fact, I think he texted Pastor Edwards that you didn't do enough to expose the Pope, did not do enough. And she came, she really talking too fast. And I said, he should have been more blatant in telling about this number. Is that a good way? Like, are we supposed to do that? To really be so sharp in attacking or something, exposing, that would probably trigger persecution, or is that necessary to do that?
There are two approaches adopted in Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the latest, which is, I think, more mainstream, is that the presentation of the mark of the beast should not be done publicly. It is more advised that it be done in a more private setting. Although there are some, like for example, bachelor tribes in attacking, especially in the Roman Catholic Church. And I think those are now in minority. Because the principle is the purpose of the gospel is to invite. Come. Then how could you invite when you are already picturing some as devilish? That's why in the original, for example, in the original version of the Great Controversy, there were very, very strong statements there against papacy. But in the 1811 edition of the Great Controversy, those very, very strong statements against the papacy were somehow modified. Although the facts still remain. And there was also very, very lately, I think the latest was in the, I was already here. Remember when the General Conference had printed millions and millions of Great Controversy as a missionary book, as a reach out book. And if you read the original edition of the Great Controversy, with that edition, then you would find a lot of modifications. Does it mean that we are no longer believing the role, the historical role and prophetic role of the papacy as the end unfolds? No. So in my case, when I engage, I participate, especially if I am the featured speaker, I do not enjoy publicly talking about the market and present it, especially if I know that there are Roman Catholic, in the audience. And I'm not criticizing Bachelor, but he is one of those Seventh-day Adventists who seem to enjoy attacking. His approach is almost always attacking. Attacking this and attacking that. In fact, if you remember, before the coming of the Pope here, he made public statements that the United States Congress was going to convene, no, and that would usher in the unraveling of Sunday. That's why many of our members were alarmed. And that was also the time that I had, I think in the other room, a series of studies on the. So those if you are a Seventh-day Adventist and you attack, you enjoy more in exposing the errors of other religions, then you are not a gospeler. Because what we bring is good news.
Yeah, especially when you have this effort like this, and there's a Roman Catholic that's invited. Now they talk about the Pope and they attack the Pope. It's going to be offensive to them because first of the Pope, whom they told us God and respected him so much, and then all of a sudden it's demonized by the preacher, then they're going to be driven away.
I think there should be a balance there also, because it's also important for us to realize and to also tell that there's a system. It's not because it's a system. It's not one person that we're talking about here. It's not the Pope that's being attacked, but the way the system itself. So we know that we have to call the gospel also is supposed to tell the truth, and sometimes the truth is something that will divide. Jesus himself said that he has come not to bring peace, but actually division, because there will be always the case when to tell the truth. With regards to attacking a person, I think that is not good, and of course, and also a religion itself, of what they're going to do in the future. Sometimes I feel like we are persecuting the Catholic Church as a result of this, or persecuting Catholics when we talk about this papacy. But where do we strike the balance there, Pastor? Because we have to also tell the truth. If after they're going to make it too private, how will others know?
I think there will come a time that may become necessary in a family. Because this time, and this is where it requires a lot of discipline. There are some Seventh-day Adventist ministers included that they seem to always enjoy living in an atmosphere of anticipated and created crisis. And they seem to get more followings if they maintain that kind of tension. Now, if I understand Ellen White correctly, she said, although she said it more than 100 years ago, that a large majority of God's people are still found in different denominations, Protestant denominations. And then she said, not accepting the Roman Catholic Church. So if a large majority of God's people are still scattered in the different Protestant denominations, and she specifically said not accepting the Roman Catholic Church, then what is my business to unnecessarily attack those? So,
Or the Pope, or what? What we're attacking?
You do not attack. You cannot attack the papacy without attacking the Pope. Because the Pope is the personification of the system which is called grace. Now, in Revelation chapter 18, okay, in Revelation chapter 18, it is prophesied that there will come a time when this powerful angel will descend from heaven with great might. And what will be the message of that powerful angel? Come out of heaven,
My people.
my people. Although again, if you read Ellen White more carefully, Ellen White says that the loud cry, referring to Revelation 18, has started to sound in 1888 when the righteousness by faith was proclaimed. It started. So, as Seventh-day Adventists, is it now time for us to call, come out? Now, if it is time for us to say, come out, now, there is an existential crisis there. Because Ellen White also said that we just have to differentiate between a Seventh-day Adventist and a non-Seventh-day Adventist. So if there is not much difference between a Seventh-day Adventist still or a non-Seventh-day Adventist still, if you tell them to come out and join you, there is not much difference, then what's the point? Just like my last point here, you remember when Emilio Pinigli, you remember him? When he was trying to convince Billy Graham to consider the Adventist faith. The greatest faith thought that was bothering or challenging Emilio Pinigli is the Seventh-day Adventist ready to welcome a man like Billy Graham, who is even considered to be much skillful to many of those who were already. So Emilio said, what's the sense of inviting in when those who are in are not ready? My father